Ann Hayden is Senior Director of Climate Resilient Water Systems at the Environmental Defense Fund, oversees the California Water Program for EDF, and leads initiatives to help the agricultural sector transition to a future with less water in ways that minimize economic impacts while taking into account the needs of disadvantaged communities and ecosystems. And recently, AB 252, which was a bill carried by Assembly Member Rivas, became part of the budget bill, and which was signed by the governor. And Anne had a little bit to do with that. And so take it away, Anne.
Great,
Welcome.
I'm going to share my screen.
Yep.
I'm also going to
I'll stop my share too, so make it easier.
You see my presentation now?
We see you. And
try it again.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
Good.
Yes? No, now I can't.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I screwed it up trying to help. So,
okay.
Yeah, why don't you just try that again? I'll get out of the way.
Now do you see it?
Yeah, my helping is not good.
Thanks for that intro, Dennis. And I'm going to continue the theme of multi-benefit projects and opportunities around them. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all today about some of the efforts that EDF and our partners have underway to create a more climate resilient Central Valley. So as Dennis mentioned, I lead EDF's California Water Program, and I'm going to talk a bit today about what we are hoping is kind of a new era emerging around groundwater sustainability in the state, and where there are innovative strategies starting to be elevated that can help balance both water supplies while also creating new opportunities for agriculture, for communities, and for ecosystems. So I'm going to advance. Okay, so for my talk today, I'm going to first just quickly touch on who EDF is, what we do. Then I'm going to touch on climate change and the importance of balancing our California groundwater supplies. And then I will transition to the work that EDF and our water program is doing to support more resilient water and land management, including the establishment of a new multi-benefit land repurposing program. So quickly, for those who are not familiar with EDF, we are a global environmental nonprofit working to address some of the world's most pressing environmental challenges through a combination of science and economics, partnerships, and advocacy. And our program areas are focused on energy, oceans, health, and ecosystems. We actually just renamed it to people and nature. So our water program fits within that category. Our water program itself focuses on three main geographies. We're working deeply in California in the upper and lower Colorado River Basin. And then in Texas, we are in the early stages of starting to expand more westwide, and also internationally looking at working in Mexico and India going forward. So we choose to work in places where agricultural water use is the primary water user, and where water scarcity is the primary and very pressing issue related to water management. And our goal across all of these geographies is to develop replicable tools and approaches that can help rebalance these water supplies and make them more resilient to climate change. And critical to building resilience is stewarding our largest and historically really overlooked of our freshwater supplies, and that's groundwater. So as Felicia touched on, California is now in the midst of struggling through another record-setting multi-year drought. Millions of Californians are facing limited water supplies, and our reservoirs have plummeted to record low levels. And as this map indicates, we have 100% of California is now experiencing anywhere from moderate to exceptional drought as of September 14th. And it's really during years like this one, when California has to rely much more on groundwater to supplement water supplies from snow melt, rain and rivers for residential, industrial, and agricultural uses. So on average, agriculture and urban water users rely on groundwater for about 40% of their water needs in normal years. And then in drought years, it's anywhere upwards to 60% or more of water needs are met by groundwater. And so about 85% of Californians depend on groundwater for at least some portion of their water supply. And in many rural communities, particularly in the Central Valley, groundwater is the only source of drinking water. And rural communities with shallow wells are, particularly vulnerable when groundwater is overpumped. These water access issues, not surprisingly, are felt most acutely during times of drought, such as the 2012 to 2016 drought, where there were stories of communities having to bottle or truck in bottled water. Actually, we're hearing stories of that as we speak. That's already starting to happen in many communities in the valley. And what this map shows is during the last drought, the purple dots indicate all the households that reported shortages, and the yellow dots are the water systems that applied for funding during the last drought. So really significant issue that is only going to persist as we experience these dry year conditions and if we don't deal and address this issue head on. So over the past several decades, we've been pumping groundwater much faster than it's been replenished, causing our groundwater supplies to be overdrafted. And this has been especially felt in the San Joaquin Valley, which is one of our most productive agricultural regions. And this graph shows the times and magnitudes when aquifer overdraft and replenishment was occurring in the San Joaquin Valley. And the orange bars show when the overdraft years and magnitudes were occurring, and then blue bars are showing when aquifer replenishment was taking place. As you can see, there's obviously much more groundwater pumping happening in dry years than is being recharged, resulting in rapidly declining groundwater levels. And this overpumping really hit a tipping point during our last drought, when it was causing vast amount of drinking water wells to dry up. Land was sinking, literally feet. Millions of dollars of impacts and infrastructure damages were related to land subsidence. And all of that finally helped prompt some of the change that was greatly needed. And so in 2014, California became the last state in the West to pass legislation that mandates sustainable management of our groundwater supplies. So the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or as it's known, SGMA, is what we consider the most significant water legislation passed in California in over a century. And SGMA requires the formation of local groundwater sustainability agencies who are tasked with developing plans to demonstrate how the region will balance groundwater supply and demand. And this local control was a critical aspect to the passage of the act itself. So transitioning to EDF's role. So we have a number of efforts underway focused on advancing more sustainable groundwater management in California and helping stakeholders implement SGMA. We do that through working with farmers and water managers and others on the ground to implement pilot projects where we're testing out our approach on the ground, and then through pilots and then scaling that for greater impact. We also are improving data accessibility by developing open source technology platforms to drive better data-driven decisions. We've also been developing guidance on, to help water managers, farmers, and other stakeholders address some of the more challenging aspects of SGMA. And then finally, we're engaging with community members and equipping them with the tools and information to be more active in water decision-making. They have historically been, almost completely left out of decisions, and we're really trying to change that course, as are a number of community-based organizations in the Valley. So one project we're really excited about is a new online water data platform called OpenET, and that is expected to launch later on in October. Many of those who work on water and make decisions about water management every day, so your farmers, local and regional water managers, state and federal planners, they often lack access to consistent, timely data about one of the most important pieces of information related to water management, and that's the amount of water that's consumed by crops and other vegetation as they grow. So OpenET aims to fill this huge gap in water data by making satellite-based data information available from 17 Western states, and enable thereby the implementation of more new and innovative water strategies on the ground. You cannot manage what you don't monitor, and this is really an important measuring tool and data need that's being filled. And this tool has been developed through a really innovative public-private partnership involving NASA, EDF, Google Desert Research Institute, and others, with the input of over 100 farmers, water managers, and other stakeholders. So soon, anyone will be able to go to openetdata.org and zoom in on a field in any of those 17 Western states and be able to access water data going back 5 years. And so it cannot be overstated how transformative it will be to have farmers and water managers, both big and small, be able to have this data at their fingertips, when to date it's been very expensive, fragmented, and very difficult to access. And so we actually have one water district in Kern County, which is in the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley. It's ground zero for groundwater overdraft. That water district is already using OpenET, and another technology tool that we helped develop, which is an online open source accounting and trading platform, which you can see pictured here. The platform essentially allows landowners to be able to check their water budget in the same way that they would check their online bank account. And so it allows folks to know how much water they have to work with and make decisions based on that. The platform also allows landowners the ability to buy and sell water with other farmers within the district. As supplies are becoming increasingly scarce, this is trading is going to be a tool that many are going to want to deploy. We intentionally developed this platform using open source code so that it could be easily used and customized by other water districts, so that they wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel and create their own platform. So earlier this year, we were really excited to create a partnership with the Department of Water Resources to build out the platform and make it accessible on a voluntary basis to water districts throughout the state. And so that work is underway. And the water trading piece, I just have to note, is really important and it requires careful consideration. There is a really huge need to make sure we have the rules and guardrails in place to ensure that disadvantaged communities and groundwater dependent ecosystems are protected as trades move forward. And so that is something that EDF is actively involved in shaping, and we're working with the California Water Commission on a process right now to eventually get to some draft rules, most likely probably mid next year. So now to the multi-benefit land repurposing work. So so developing water budgets and allowing well-designed trading programs to be implemented are two very important parts of a water portfolio needed to create, more resilience in the system and help farmers transition to more sustainable groundwater management. But even with those tools in place, it's inevitable, unfortunately, that substantial land use changes in California and across the Central Valley will occur because there's just not going to be enough water to go around. And it's estimated, somewhere between 500,000 upwards of 1 million, I've heard more than that, acres of farmland will need to be taken out of production over the next couple of decades in order to balance groundwater supply and demand in the San Joaquin Valley. And actually that number is really for across the Central Valley. So that's approximately 15% of current farmland in the region, and it's equivalent to the size of Yosemite National Park. So we're talking of a huge amount of acreage that if we're not proactive in planning for how that land is managed after it is taken out of production, we could see a valley that is transformed into a patchwork of barren fields, kicking up dust, impairing air quality that's already pretty impaired across the valley, and making other lands, remaining ag lands, susceptible to weeds and pests growing on those idled fields. And it could just have massive economic impacts to the valley. Alternatively, we think it's possible to strategically repurpose some of those lands, those previously irrigated lands, so that they can continue to produce value. And so some potential uses of these lands include, and these are uses that would not require much, if any, water to produce. So multi-benefit groundwater recharge basins. We need to be able to collect and capture water in flood years and store it underground. Felicia really hit on that. There's ways to design these groundwater basins so that they can create surrogate wetland habitat for migratory birds. They can reduce flood risks to communities. They can help rebalance, bring balance back to the groundwater basin. And if sited the right way, they can improve water quality for disadvantaged communities if they're in proximity to drinking water wells. So multi-benefit groundwater recharge basins, that's one of the potential uses. Wildlife habitat, cover crops, managed grazing, low impact solar, and community recreational spaces and parks. So over the past, I would say the past couple of years, we've been actively involved in convening stakeholders and supporting innovative efforts to really plan for this imminent land use change. And earlier this year, we produced this white paper that's shown here that provides findings that came out of a series of stakeholder workshops that we hosted. These are stakeholders who are from the Valley, from groundwater sustainability agencies. These are farmers, these are county land use agencies, these are local NGOs. And they all provided input into considerations to maximize environmental, social, and economic outcomes related to land repurposing programs while we're addressing this issue of trying to reduce groundwater pumping. And we've also been working closely with stakeholders in Tulare and Kings County to develop a regional conservation planning investment strategy in one subbasin, in the Cahuilla subbasin. And so this is basically a pilot land repurposing program to demonstrate how one subbasin can work together, can collaborate, and include the perspectives of local stakeholders, farmers, water managers, and strategically plan for land use change and really lay the framework to more effectively bring payments into that subbasin to voluntarily, for farmers to voluntarily repurpose irrigated lands and create benefits like habitat and wildlife friendly recharge basins. And so beyond the guidance and demonstrations that we've been working on, it's been really clear to us that much more funding is going to be needed to help kickstart beneficial land repurposing in regions that have to reduce groundwater pumping. So earlier this year, Dennis mentioned this, Assemblymember Rivas, who, in looking at this picture, is to my left, introduced AB 252. EDF sponsored the bill, aimed at creating a multi-benefit land repurposing program to help farmers voluntarily repurpose some of their lands to new uses that require less water and create environmental and community benefits. And just last week, the governor signed the budget that included $50 million to establish this program. It goes without saying, much more funding will be needed to address this issue at scale, but this is a really important step towards helping California adapt to climate change and achieve groundwater sustainability goals while benefiting this whole array of stakeholders, ecosystem, community members, and growers. And so a bit about the program itself. It's hard to go into too much detail because the guidelines need to be produced, but we have a framework that we developed in AB 252 that I think is a good starting point. So in general, the Department of Conservation will oversee this program, but they're going to do that in close coordination with Department of Food and Ag, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and other agencies that are interested, who have a strong interest in agriculture, wildlife, and groundwater management. And so the way this will work is the DOC will provide grants to local public agencies such as groundwater sustainability agencies and counties, as well as potentially local nonprofit organizations in overdrafted groundwater basins that are interested in implementing a local or regional land repurposing program to reduce groundwater pumping. So the entities would need to come up with a vision for what they want to see within the boundaries that they're looking to manage. These local entities can then in turn provide grant funds from this program as payments to landowners who voluntarily repurpose irrigated farmland and create these new uses that I detailed previously. And importantly, it was very important to us that we make sure that this program be flexible and meet growers where they are, because this is a huge transition. Not every grower is going to raise their hand and be willing to participate in a permanent land repurposing program or project. There will be some who do that, but there'll be many more who will be interested in a project of 10 or 15 years. And so funding can be used for both term and permanent projects, during which time, whatever the term is, the landowner will have to demonstrate a reduction in groundwater use. And funding, importantly, will be prioritized for projects that show how land can be consolidated and repurposed, as well as those projects that directly benefit disadvantaged communities, either by enhancing drinking water supplies, providing open space, or reducing flood risk. So as I mentioned, much more funding is going to be needed, not only from the state, but also I'm envisioning, maybe there's an analog program that can be created through the feds. And I also think there's a role for the private sector to play to help us address this issue at scale. I am optimistic that, now that we're getting this new program in place, that we can quickly start demonstrating how this can be done strategically so that we can deliver multiple benefits. And that will really help prepare us to attract more folks to invest in this, quite honestly, a really daunting challenge that I think will, run into the low billions to address. So on that daunting note, that's what I wanted to present today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, great presentation and great accomplishment, actually, with the multi-benefit land use program. I mean, that's, I guess, along the lines of the first cut is the deepest or something. I mean, getting a program up and funded and, is a great way to have a program that is really well funded. So it's great to see that. We have do have a question from Tom Francis, which is an interesting one. Do you see a role for Bay Area urban water suppliers such as East Bay Mud, SFPUC, Valley Water, et cetera, in the work that you are doing with agricultural districts and the farming community?
That is a very good question.
Yeah, he's thinking ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I need to sit on that some more. I mean, the system is very much, in some ways it's very fragmented, but in other ways it's very much connected. And many urban agencies rely on agriculture from time to time, for transfers in dry years. So there's that connection there. I you know I could see a role in the potential investment in more conveyance and development of these groundwater basins. The conveyance is the big gap in the system, and the ability to actually store the water underground. And so the extent to which the Bay Area sees benefit because of that relationship from time to time of looking to agriculture to help meet their needs during dry years, helping to invest in a more robust conveyance system and multi-benefit recharge infrastructure, I think could be really valuable, among other things. But it's an excellent question. So I'll have to get my wheels turning a bit more on other ways, because I'm sure there are many other ways.
Well, in the next session, actually, there will be some talk about, groundwater trading. I think Aaron Fukuda will be talking about that. And then, conveyance issues, I think maybe some approaches might be addressed as well. So it's great that you're provided this background, and then there's going to be more kind of discussion about maybe some of the possibilities ahead.
Exactly. Pose the question to them.
Yes, well, we will do that.
I'm sure Aaron Fukuda will have lots of ideas.
I'll throw one quick one out, and before we get to the next session, and that's our Central Valley groundwater banks leave 10% of water behind to help improve storage for the local farmers. I guess that's not in the form of a question, but it's a statement, I suppose.
Yes, so there will, these are the details that need to get worked out as the guidelines are developed, but there will certainly be leave behinds as part of these recharge projects for sure, because this is not just an effort to help farmers and water managers mitigate the loss of access to water. We really do need to see this program directly benefiting groundwater basins and water levels. So figuring out the appropriate leave behind is going to be high priority and an interesting discussion in the coming months.
Well, thank you once again, Ann Hayden, Senior Director of either Resilient Water Systems or Climate Resilient Water Systems at Environmental Defense Fund.
Thank you.